If you look at insertion sort, it doesn't bother about AI plus 1 to AN at all when it is trying to fix AI. Okay? Among the things that are processed, it locates it. In other words, my data is not depending on the future values. It depends only on whatever that has been accumulated so far. So each one of them has got different context in which they are suitable and applicable. There are certain other conditions imposed by applications. For instance, we talk of the notion of stability. Stability means when you find equal items, their relative ranking should be maintained. Okay? For instance, I have two printers. We have certain priorities given for the jobs on printer 1, and we have another priority given for printer 2. One of them is down and you are now putting both the jobs together. Okay? Now what will happen for the ones with equal priority? In other words, when the equal numbers are there, suppose you have a sequence, here itself you take 7 over here and 7 over here, right? So in the merged sequence there will be two 7s. Which 7 will you put first and which 7 you put next? This is important in some application. In certain applications, the stability, that is, their relative ordering should not change. The equal element may be there. In other words, I have the following, let's say 3, 5, 8, 3, 6, 9. If you sort, 2 3s will come together. Suppose this is in A1 and this is in A2, A3, A4. Therefore, this 3 is in A4 and this 3 is in my final sorted sequence, I will have 3 and 3, but the one in A1 should come here and one in A4 should come here. In your swapping process, I don't want this 3 coming here and this 3 going over there or something like that. That is because in some temporal sense, I have this appearing much later than this. So among two with equal one, the way in which I would resolve the conflict is, okay, the person who is already entitled for that one would give the priority. Take the printer analogy. So let us say 3 over here and 3 in that printer. That printer is down, so that is going to be merged. Of course it is a high priority item, but then putting ahead of the equal priority person on this queue would obviously hurt the feeling of this person. I know that he is equal priority, but then he would like to come and join behind me rather than going ahead of me, right? So they are called stable. So which of the sorting systems are stable? Certain things are stable, and insertion sort is stable. That is because the way in which you stop is you start from here and then you go ahead, and the moment you find equal or smaller, you stop there. Therefore the guys with equal priority but who have gone ahead stays ahead, right? So each one has got certain advantage. In quicksort, what happens? Smaller here, large, you throw that over here and this over here, all over the data is swapped in the entire array. Okay? So it is not just the comparison alone. Every application would demand why there are 350 sorting algorithms, of which only 35 or 40 is discussed in Knut's book. Okay? Why there are so many methods? Each context would say, well, this is not really suitable here, and I have already seen 4 of the sorting methods. None of them is impressive for me, so I would like to find out something better than that. And this kind of desire to discover, to customize a methodology to the context has led to the creation of so many methods. So you should always look for, in the particular context, which is suitable. Okay? If it is suitable in a straightforward manner, that is the reason why here it is to be sorted. Let me use a sort library and then pull it out here. Just doesn't work. Right? I know this sort library is designed by experts who have optimized everything, and it must be a fantastic sort routine, fine-tuned up to the assembler level and so on, and maybe. But blindfold application of that in your context is not going to bring you the desired efficiency, because your application may require something very different to be done, and that particular sorting method may or may not be appropriate for this context. Right? So these are all certain points that we should remember in. Yes. Lower bound is established for sorting. The lower bound is log n factorial to the base 2, which is n log n. By Stirling approximation, this is n power n plus half, etc. So it will be n log n. This is the lower bound for sorting. That is the reason why the moment I get n log n algorithm, I don't try to improve the complexity any further. I try to work only at the fine-tuning level. Right? Fundamentally different idea I will not try to discover there, because I cannot get anything done better than n log n anyway. Trying to discover an order n sorting algorithm is a foolish attempt, because it is impossible. Okay? N log n is the lower bound for the number of comparisons. Yeah, question.
In merge sort, the division of the array into the division of arrays, how that will impact the efficiency?
No, at this juncture, the if you look at the complexity, the merging of two sequence of size n and m is n plus m. Because of this particular feature, splitting has very little effect in this. You can split anyway, the merge cost is going to be same. There is no. So the only way you can benefit is by bottoming out the recursion at a slightly higher level. That experiments have been done, and by merging, you don't fragment the records into too many individual records and then try to merge. Merge it at a level where whatever is one full bunch through one single disk access you can bring in and merge. You do that, and then from there you bottom up. So you don't have to really do it at until you get to one particular record, then make one access for one record, another access for another record, merge them and then put them back through yet another access back into the disk. That if you do, obviously it's going to take enormous amount of time. So where do you bottom out? Depending on your disk and in one go how much you can access, you can bottom up. So that will define the threshold. Your buffer size, your reading heads capacity, all of them determine where to bottom up. That's the aspect of code tuning. Here is a methodology. How to make it better is depending on your environment, and experimenting that you do will tell you how it is to be done.
Sir, this merge sort is more useful in punch records and in tapes compared to disk.
No, any tape or disk, that's fine. But punched card is not used any longer.
But it is introduced on punch card.
Long back, yes. But this is basically not depending on any technology. Okay, so So much for the divide and conquer. There are a lot of other paradigms. What I'm going to discuss now is the next paradigm. This is called the greedy paradigm. This is something that people should be really familiar with. Every algorithm designer should have this greedy strategy as a powerful tool available at one's disposal. So greedy strategy is applicable for optimization problem. Okay. This is not applicable for sorting, this is not applicable for matrix multiplication or something like that, where you have some fixed function to be computed, fixed output need to be generated and stuffs like that. In those contexts, greedy doesn't make even sense. It is applicable for optimization problem. So what is an optimization problem? It is characterized by the following feature. For any problem P, every input you may have a solution. Typically for optimization problem, for a given input there may be several solutions, S1, S2, S3, S4. Okay, there could be several solutions possible. Of all these, for each solution you assign a cost, C1, C2, etc. In other words, there is a cost function which associates for each solution Si what is known as cost of Si. Okay. For instance, if you are looking at the graph, for every path you can associate a cost. The cost could be the distance or the length of the path. So one path may have length 10, another path may have length 12, another path may have length. So between 2 points there may be several paths. For instance, from here to Mysore railway station there can be several paths. This is one path and this is another one, this is yet another one, and this is. So there are several solutions for the problem. Find a way to reach from Infosys to Mysore railway station. Several paths may there. So there are several solutions for this instance. Among this you are interested in finding, in this case, the minimum one, minimum distance, let us say. So the cost associated with each solution is the distance. You are interested in finding the minimum distance. Typically if it is expense, labor, etc., you have to minimize. If it is profit or something like that, you have to maximize. So you can minimize or maximize the cost. That depends on the context. In this case, we are interested in finding out that solution which has a minimum cost. There may be several solutions, and attempting to find that solution with a minimum cost is an optimization problem. Sometimes you may have to find maximum cost. Cost is generally an abstract idea. It is simply assigning a positive real number for each solution. So cost is a function from the solution space to real numbers. So this assigns for each solution a real number, positive real number. It could be time, money, distance, anything that arises in practice. You can quantify them, and that quantification process assesses a kind of a value for that solution. And you are interested in either maximizing or minimizing depending on the context. So maximizing or minimizing, common terminology is optimizing. So optimization problems are encountered in practice. Day in and day out you want to optimize so many things. So how to find an optimal solution in a context is a very important problem in almost every application. Okay. So how do we solve optimization problems? How do we formulate and there are a lot of strategies and techniques available. We are going to look at the greedy strategy now. Okay. Again, we will start with the simplest of all our attempts from our learning experience. We would like to build the optimal solution incrementally. Little by little, you would like to get the optimum solution be built. Therefore, we are going to view the solution of our optimization problem in stages, and at each stage we are going to extend the solution. The objective is the final optimal solution is obtained in this process. There is one small catch in this. The technique is so simple that sometime it works, sometime it doesn't work. It's not something that is going to work always. There are some ideas which will always work. Sometime it may give an efficient solution, sometime it may not give efficient solution. That is okay. Right? At least it will give a solution. If you look at incremental design, it will work. Only thing is, it may or may not give you a very efficient solution. As a strategy, it will always produce a solution. Whether that is a good or bad is a different debate. But this one, greedy, may not even give you a meaningful solution. Sometime it works, sometime it doesn't work. So let us first try to understand all this with a simple example. This is called the coin change problem, and suppose you go to a vending machine, you put your dollar bill, buy something, and then the change you should obtain from the vending machine. So the vending machine has to throw the change in coins, and obviously you would not like to have lot of coins at your disposal, or you don't want the vending machine to throw, right? If you want to get 65 cents, 65 1-cent coin, if that throws, of course it pays you back whatever you are supposed to get, but then that is obviously a very inconvenient solution. You don't want to have a jingling packet after buying something from a vending machine. So you would like a value to be paid back with minimum number of coins. So we have a lot of denominations. Okay. So denomination D1, D2, D3, etc., dk. So these are all the coins, coin values. Assume that there is enough number of coins of each denomination. And you are given a value m. Okay. You can make up this value m by various combinations. Okay. For example, you can make alpha 1 coins of D1, alpha 2 coins of D2, and this could be 0. You may not use a particular denomination coin, plus alpha k coins of dk. When you add all of them, the required value is obtained. So assume that all of them are integers. Okay, all these are integers, and this is an integer, and these are all again integers, greater than or equal to 0. Some of them are 0. So this is one way of paying you back. There can be several ways in which the money m can be accounted for, value m can be accounted for. Therefore, this is a solution. I am going to assign what is known as cost of a solution. The cost of a solution from my discussion is the number of coins that is making up the value. So what is the cost of a solution? Cost of a solution is alpha 1 plus alpha 2 plus alpha k. This is called the cost of the solution. And obviously I would like to minimize. Minimize C, where C is given by alpha 1 plus alpha 2 plus alpha k, and m equal to this. That is all. The problem which I have stated to you, because a vending machine designer must know how to dispense the coins. There are several denominations available, and with the remaining money it has to pull out 2 coins of 20 cent, 2 of 5 cent and 1 of, and then it should make it up and then give it to you. So some algorithm is to be built in so that for a given value how to pull out those coins and then dispense, and this is only one way, right. Therefore it has to be exact. It can't give something more and then expect you to pay back. You might obviously walk away with the extra money that is pumped in, and it cannot be less either. So it's not, you are not looking for a solution less than m or greater than m, exactly m, right, you should get. So I want to make sure that such a thing is possible, and when several such solutions are possible, I want to get the minimum. So consider, for example, 1, 20 and 50. Assume that there are only coins of 3 denominations, 1, 20 and 50, and you are interested in paying back certain amount over here, right. For instance, if it is 140, the greedy strategy is going, or 145, the greedy strategy will work as follows. How many 50s possible in this? Let me use the maximum, so that I have to use less number of coins. So the higher denomination values, let me use as much as possible, is the first thinking. Okay. So you can pay 250, let's say paise coins, and that accounts for 100. So remaining 45, how would you pay? You would like to maximum the next one. I can't pay any more 50. So I take 220, and that gives me 40, and then I take 5 1 paise coin, that accounts for 5. 145 is accounted for, and the total number of coins is 2 plus 2 plus 5, which is 9. So using 9 coins, I have paid 145 back. Okay. And this strategy is greedy strategy. In order to minimize, what I do is as much higher denomination as possible you use, and then the next best you can do. In other words, the solution is built in stages. In each stage, I don't take a global view. In other words, I don't look at the entire possibilities or various possibilities. I take a kind of a local view, and then I give a locally optimal solution, or I make a locally optimal decision. Okay. With 50, how many I can give for 145? 2. That is the maximum I can give. So this decision I make, and then I proceed further, and then again I make another decision on 20 and proceed further. So in this way I proceed further. So every time, any time I am at a position, I only think of the following: with the current denomination, how much I can pay, maximum let me pay it, and then go to the next one, and so on. So this is the greedy strategy, hoping to minimize the number of coins that you would use to pay back a particular value. Now you see there is going to be a problem here. Consider 65. For 65, what will happen is the following: how many 50s you can pay? As much as possible. So 1 into 50 you would pay, that is 50, and there is 15 remaining. How much 20 I can pay? I can't pay any 20. So how much 1 I should pay? 15 into 0 into 20, 15 into 115. This accounts for 65, but the number of coins that I am using is 16, large number of coins. Instead, I have a better way of paying 65. 3 into 20, that makes 60. 5 into 1, that is 5. 65 is made, but with 8 coins I am able to pay back. So it is not that the higher denomination coins usage is always minimizing the total number of coins that you would use to pay back. This is why greedy fails, right? It is not necessary that the greedy always works. greedy may fail. A particular strategy in which you are trying to build a solution by a series of locally optimal decision may or may not work. Here is an example where it just doesn't work. All right. I presented this example because I would like to first caution that this is a good technique provided if it works. So, you should not jump on this method as soon as you get an optimization problem to be solved. Yes, if it works, it is beautiful. It's a really very elegant way of building the optimal solution. Just take one smaller instance, build an make an optimal decision, build little more and make yet another optimal decision, and so on. You make a sequence of optimal decisions, computations are simple, the whole program coding effort, everything will become lot easier provided it works. Otherwise, you will have something produced, but it may be a junk answer. Okay. So, applying mindlessly the greedy for 65, you can see what disaster it has. It is using twice as much as yet another solution in which the highest denomination is not even considered. Okay. So, this attempting to be greedy is not a good strategy in the long run in certain situations, because you may have to pay a lot more at a later stage and overall you may not find any gain. Okay. It is also well explained in the shortest path problem with a very simple example. Suppose you want to go from A to B, and this is 200 and this is 100, and suppose this is 350 and this is 75. If you take only a local view, I want to go from A to B, all right, let me go to the cheapest neighbor, and from there let me go to another cheapest neighbor. In this way I will keep on accumulating the cheapest reach, and together I would like to have the cheapest path. If that is your thinking, you can see how this proves that to be wrong. Between these two, this is the cheapest. So, if you take the option from here, the cheapest one is only one available, because it is a very simple example, 350, and the total cost will be 450. But even though initially you have taken a longer route, you see that later on you have something cheaper. So, if you had taken this route in 275, you would have reached B, whereas in this one your initial decision has led to something later on which could be very expensive. You are bottlenecked in such a way that you end up paying lot more, and therefore this does not pay. Okay. So, this is a very simple situation where if you want to go from A to B, okay, have the cheapest hops and reach is not going to really work. Okay. So, do not fly by Deccan Air all the time. Okay. So, now let us look at a situation where this is working, because when it works wonders, and we should know a situation where it is working. And invariably you have to prove that it works. That is the most subtle part. That it does not prove, you can usually give by counter examples. That is really mathematical. So, I am not going to give a formal proof, but I am going to tell you that it just works. Okay. The formal proof of it you can check in your textbook or in some other context, or I am planning to give a detailed lecture on each one of this module with full proofs, completely explained, illustrated, and with the transparency masters created for that, and there also you can refer as a repository. So, right now I am going to tell you only, without giving that proof detail, but the complete detail of the method, application and the solution I am going to describe. So, the problem is the following. You would like to store a large file, very large file. This is for the archiving purposes. Okay. So, it is only storing. What you will do in this is, because it is archiving, you will store and you will retrieve. You are not going to do any other big computation, etc. with this. Okay. So, you have a file, it is a large character file, a very huge character file, and then you would like to archive it. So, you would like to store it with the minimum space used. And you have also made the following observation when you have analyzed the file. This is a kind of file that is generated in the genome project, right, or in the context of computational biology, where there are about 4 or 5 characters, but there are several millions of them. So, you have a file, yeah, that has got 1 million characters, okay, but it consists of 1 million characters, which consists of, let us say, A, B, C, D and E, right. So, some number of A's are there, some number of B's are there, some number of C's, some number of D's and some number of E's are there. That information also you have. You have scanned it and then you have found out how many A's and how many B's. Now, you want to store it. I can use the plain ASCII, but the problem with the plain ASCII is I use 8-bit for each one of them. So, my file will have 8 million bits. Okay. Can't I use something better than that? All I want is that I want to put and then I want to store and retrieve. That is all I want. And there are only 5 characters here. When there are only 5 characters, can't I come up with my own coding scheme, where this is represented by 0, 0, 0. This is represented by 0, 0, 1 and 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1 and 1, 1, 1. So, E is this and D is this, C is this. No problem, there is no confusion here, there is no ambiguity, and everything is perfect in this case. Okay. And all I have to now use is I am representing 3 bits for each one of them, and for 1 million I can use only 3 million bits. This is 8 million bit solution and this is a 3 million bit solution. And how do I retrieve? It is very simple. Before giving it to anybody, this one, all I have to do is that retrieve, cut the bit stream into 3 bits each, and each 3 bit you interpret correspondingly back as A, B, C, D, E or something like that, and you can give back to anyone and anyone can use it, and they can even read the file and do this algorithm of splitting into 3 equal bits, and it is possible. So, using retrieving etc. is possible, but now I am using substantially less number of bits. Given the context that there are only 5 kinds, I could immediately reduce from 8 million to 3 million. Okay. Now the question is, can I reduce this further? So this 3 is, from 8 to 3 is obtained by looking at the number of items that you are coding. So the next possible improvement, if at all you want to make, it can be done by looking at the frequency with which they are occurring. Okay. That is the only option now available. In order to anyway represent 5 distinct objects, you need 3 bits. If there are only 4 objects, then with 2 bits I can distinguish 4 objects, but I have 5 objects now, so I must use 3 bits, which I have used, and then I have now got a 3 million bit representation. So, the huge file can be now compressed, and then it can be represented like this. Now, can we reduce further? The answer is yes, and it is done by Huffman, and therefore it is called the Huffman code. So, instead of using ASCII code or even the plain bit representation with equal length bit strings, Huffman produced something called variable bit length code. Okay. Let there be variation. It is not necessary that A should be always represented by 3 bit and B should be. I might represent something with a smaller bits and I must use something with a larger bit. It is okay, let me have the flexibility, right. But all I want is that I want the total to be minimized, because it is archiving purpose. I do not want that to take lot of space. And remember, this is very important problem in the context of biological application, where typically there are only 4 basic kinds of amino acids, which are named A, T, B and some number, and then there is an end marker or separator. So, except 4 or 5 symbols, you are not going to have anything in that entire description of the gene. The gene consists of a long sequence of this amino acid components, and that one will be represented by a huge string. So, a typical gene will run into the description of millions of characters, and you need to do a lot of work on this. You want to find the gene similarity, you want to find the pattern, and then so it has to be archived, and then when something new is found out, you have to verify from all of them. So, this archiving of such large files requires some optimization and careful consideration, and we can apply the Huffman codes and the technique proposed by Huffman to achieve it. It is naturally a greedy one. Okay. The greedy, it is as follows. Suppose A is 40 times and B is 20 and C is 20, something like that. Okay. 40, 20, 20, 10, 10, let us say. Then even if D and E is slightly larger, it does not matter. But if A is represented by 1 bit, that is nice, right, because 40 out of 1 million, 40% of them are accounted by with single bit itself. But while doing this, I have to be little careful. We will see what care need to be done and how Huffman has worked through this after the break. It is already 10:35. So, we will meet after the break and continue with the discussion on this and how the greedy strategy works. And after that, I am going to discuss on NP completeness, because we are already coming to an end of the series. So, there is one more topic in your manual which requires some discussion, which I will do and then conclude this series. Okay. So, I will continue with this Huffman code for a while and explain greedy paradigm, and then take up the topic on NP completeness and tell you how that should be understood and then be put to good use, and then conclude the series. Then I will give a complete recapturing overview and complete the discussion. From the beginning up to this point, whatever we have seen in one full perspective, I will recall and conclude my series. This is what I am going to do in my second half of the discussion. Look at this example where the frequencies of 6 characters in a long file is something like 45,000, 13,000, 12,000, 16,000, 9,000 and 5,000 respectively. In other words, suppose we know the frequency. Instead of blindly representing each one with 3 characters, we can come up with a better scheme using the greedy strategy, recommended by Huffman. Okay. What his recommendation is, whenever there is a varying, in fact this is also a basic from coding theory, if you have a varying length, then you must use what is known as prefix free codes. If it is a fixed length, when you see a long bit stream, you can split into 3 and each one of them can be correspondingly mapped out. But when they are varying length, we should know where to break it. Otherwise, we will run into a problem. There will be ambiguity. For instance, if you have 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 and 0, 0, 1, 1, 0 representing, let us say this is A, this is B, this is C, for example. Then you do not know, when you see 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, whether it is representing C or whether it is representing AB. That is because you see the commonality here. So, when you go ahead, should I stop with that or should I proceed further, will not be clear, and because it is varying length, you do not know where to really stop and then recover the original character. Since this is the problem, you should consider only what is known as prefix free codes. That means one is not going to occur completely as a prefix of the other. So, there is a point at which they will differ. If it is completely prefix, that means one is going to be a substring. When it is not a substring, then there will be a difference. So, one very nice way of representing these kind of codes in binary is using a binary tree. And if you look at, if you interpret turning to the left as 0, turning to the right as 1, okay, say for example 0, and if you consider the leaves, each leaf will represent a particular string which is consistent with the interpretation of going to the right is 1 and going to the left is 0. So, 1 1 0. So, this is 1 1 0, this is 0 1 and this is 0 0. So, take any binary tree. Now, you can interpret the leaves as bit strings. Okay. Any binary tree and consider the any binary tree, consider the leaves. Leaves can be associated with bit strings. So, this leaf is associated with the bit string 0 0, 0 1, 1 1 0. The natural way of associating a bit string with a leaf. Now, this collection of bit strings, if you consider, that will form a prefix free code. The reason is a leaf is basically a different, and that is the last node. One cannot be the ancestor of the other. If one is the ancestor of the other, for example, this node is ancestor of this one. So, if you consider this node, the bit string associated with this node is 1 1 and this is 1 1 0. So, whenever one is an ancestor of other, there is a possibility that the bit string corresponding to 1 will form a prefix to the bit string representing the other. But when you have leaves, no leaf can be an ancestor to another leaf. Therefore, they are necessarily prefix free codes. Conversely, you can take any prefix free code and you can construct a binary tree representing that collection, where each code comes to a leaf. Okay. When you are able to associate, so what is a code for this? The code for this will be, let us say for A, B, C, D, E, there will be a 6-bit string B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B6. There will be 6-bit strings, and I can construct a tree with 5 internal node and 6 leaves. Okay. So, 5 internal nodes and there will be 6 leaves, and B1 can correspond to one leaf and B2 can correspond to another leaf and so on. So, this can be represented by a tree with 5 internal nodes and 6 leaves, and where each leaf corresponds to a bit string Bi. Each leaf will correspond to a bit string. Now, let us consider the way in which the greedy algorithm builds this tree. The recommendation is, initially let each one of them be treated as isolated nodes, and whenever you bring them together, let a subtree be formed. And what you are going to bring down is 2 values which have got the smallest weight. The weight of a node is defined as the weight of values in the subtree. Okay. When it is a node, the weight is simply the values which are here. So, first you are going to bring 9 and 5 together. So, 5 here and 9 here, and you put them together and you create a super node. In fact, this is an internal node. Okay. And the weight of that internal node is 14. And now 9 and 5 are gone in terms of E and F. Instead, there is some super node with weight 14 is here. Now, the next smallest pair in this collection is 13 and 12. Take 13 and 12 and fuse 25. 13 corresponds to B, okay, 12 corresponds to C, 13 corresponds to B, and even B and C are gone. In its place now I have something with weight 25. So, among these two, the minimums are 16 and 14. Put these two together. So, 16 16 will be here, 14 is over there, and its weight is 30, because you add all of this you get 30. So, 25 and 14, and you have instead a 30 is here. The I think I have 16 and 14 is what is erased. What was here? B? Yeah, no, 30 and 25 are here. So, 30 and 25 now are to be merged. And 55 will be there, and this is the last one, 45, and 50 on this side. So, notice that 45 is something last that is merged. So, that will remain as one leaf, everything else will become the other subtree. And now you consider the 1. So this is what is this? This is B, right? This is A. So A, F, E, B, C. No, this is D. Huh? D. So these are the leaves. You can see there are 6 leaves because they are combined, and then this tree is formed. And now interpret the tree as I have told you. So left is 0. So now I can have A 0. B corresponds to this. This is 1, 1, 1. C corresponds to 1, 1, 0. D corresponds to 1, 0, 1. E corresponds to 1, 0, 0, 1. F corresponds to 1, 0, 0, 0. This is the coding scheme. Okay. This is actually the coding scheme. And how many bits I would now represent this? So A's frequency is 45, B's frequency is 13, C's frequency is 12, and D's frequency is 16, 9, and 5. So this is going to take 45 into 1, 45, plus 13 into 3, 39, plus 12 into 3, 36, plus 16 into 3, 48, plus 9 into 4, 36, plus 5 into 4, 20. This many thousand bits I am going to use. So, it is much better than my use 3 bits for each one of them. Using 3 bits for each one of them takes 300,000 bits, whereas this is taking 224,000 bits, a clear saving of 25%. Okay. So this is how the Huffman code works. The way to discover the Huffman code is build the tree by merging the 2 cheapest structures and replace that with the ones which you have merged. So every time you are going to, first you have chosen the 2 cheapest structure 5 and 9, they are single nodes, merged them and you got this. Now you bring this into the scene and remove 5 and 9. The next cheapest in the collection was 12 and 13, you merged them, you got 25, and so on. And keep doing it and you will get a tree. Interpret the leaves of the tree as we have already discussed, and that gives you a coding scheme. And if you use this code, it is a variable length code, but you get overall minimum. You can see the effect of the greedy strategy. The most frequent one is kept as high in the tree as possible so that its code length is small. The cheapest one is kept as low as possible so that its length is large. So there is a code with length 0, there is a code with length 4, but still there is no problem. Still this is economical. Okay.
Professor, one more overhead is here. By decoding. Decoding again, you have to convert that archive file into a tree structure.
No, not tree. That is why we have prefix free codes. You just make one pass. Alright?
Some delimiter should be there.
Not necessary. That is the beauty of the prefix free code. Delimiters are not needed for prefix-free code. You take any sequence, as you scan through, you stop at the corresponding code words and it will tell you, see, the algorithm is this: if you find 0, immediately output that as A. If you find that as 1, proceed one more step. If that happens to be 0, proceed one more step, and like that you can have the complete algorithm done, which is uniquely leading to this. That algorithm is what is used to recover the characters one after another. Okay? No, you will be stuck if it is not prefix free. Right? Your algorithm cannot work. It won't work if it is not. Huffman's code builds a prefix free code. So you will never get stuck. In an unambiguous way, you can. The logic is similar to this. Each internal node you replace by an if then else. You get a program, and that is a program for decoding.
Every time you have to see the table and you have to check it.
No need. Strict logic. If 0, see, you are scanning, you are at a particular stage. If next symbol is, if next bit equal to 0, then, okay, output A, then return A, else if else if the else, it means the next bit is 1. Okay, now you look at the else if next bit equal to 0, what you would do? If it is 1 0, it could be D or E or F, you don't know what it is. So if x check, if next week, then if next bit equal to 1, then return D, because it is 1 0 1, then you are going to return 1, else the next bit is 0. But just because next bit is 0, you cannot say whether it is E or F. It could be either E or F. So else if next bit equal to 0, return E, return F, else, not this else, here it is this else, then return else, return E. This is if the next bit is 1, you are returning, else also you have completed. This is if next bit equal to 0. You come back here for else. Else, this means this is next bit is 1. So here next bit is 0 in the else, so it is 1 1. So you are at 1 1. At 1 1, you now look at else if next bit equal to 0, 1 1 0, so return C, else return B. That is all. This is the decoding algorithm. Each internal node replaced by an if then else statement, and just execute the logic and then make the scan bit by bit. One pass you will require. If it is a fixed length, what do? You are in a position, go ahead, fixed length, recover the bit pattern, look into the table and then retrieve that character. That is what you will do for fixed length coding. For variable length coding, this is what you will do.
Professor, here also if that is automated, there also we have to check in the table. If that process is automated, it will be stored in a table.
Which one is stored in a table?
That Huffman algorithm, if it is automated, it will be stored in a table. That time, every time it will go and check there and it
No, no, no. There is no need for any table here.
It is something like parsing.
It's just a parsing. It is actually what I have written is a parsing algorithm. Right? Therefore, there is no need for table at all here. If I know that I have used the Huffman code to contract, then this is the algorithm that I used to retrieve. That's it. It's a part of the archival policy and retrieval policy. That's all. You take a tape, for archiving you are subjecting that to this and then create the bit stream, and then if you want to convert that back, the retrieving algorithm will be like this and can retrieve it back.
So one small note, in this case we require so many disk accesses as compared with if you have the fixed length code.
No, everything is same. Whether it is fixed length or varying length, you are going to access bit by bit.
In the case of fixed length accessing complete byte and then we are scanning.
No, no. Even then, you are not going to access 1 byte per access. Whatever is the maximum you are going to do. So
we access it in terms of to the power of something. But in this case, you have to access each and every bit and you have to scan through.
no. This is only the algorithm for recovering. So what you do is, from there you get a bit chunk. Whatever you have got in the main memory, scan it and then retrieve them. Then get the next chunk. Then bit by bit you go. In any one pass algorithm, it is not necessary to recover. The parsing is done bit by bit, but accessing need not be done bit by bit. Right?
Yeah, but again, each and every memory location has to be accessed. So whether
Each and every?
memory location,
Huh.
whether it is a RAM or it is a disk, we are accessing each and every bit there.
Yeah.
If we have the fixed length code, that it can be represented in terms of some other, let's say in terms of decimal, and we can interpret what that.
No. You imagine the overhead in that. Anything you make, fixed length or whatever it is, you have taken, let us say 1 million, let's say 100,000 characters. Fixed length 3 bits each. So 300,000 bits are there in the disk. Now how are you going to access? In one go, how many bits you can recover? Let us say 1000 bits. Okay, so you are going to get 1000 bits. What will you do to convert? This 1000 bits you will split into 3 each, and then 333 characters you will recover, and 1 bit is still there, that has to be combined with another one. So you bring in another 1000 and then again make them into chunks of 3 and convert it back by looking into the table. This 3 bit corresponds to A, this 3 bit corresponds to C, and so on. So you recover it. That is the algorithm for fixed bit. For varying bit, what do? You recover again 1000. In this 1000, you now go through bit by bit, okay, and then you recover. It's same one pass. Instead of accessing in units of 3, here you are going to do that, and you will recover in one pass. Those 3 by 3 bits also you have to access in sequence. See, first you have to get 3 bits, then you have to get another 3 bits, which is equivalent to getting 1 bit after another and building that, and get another chunk and then change it.
So in that case, we get a complexity of O of 1 mapping into the corresponding code.
Mapping into the corresponding code, this one and the other one are same. There won't be any difference. There will not be any difference in this. Right? You are going to work with same. If you look at ultimately, on behalf of each bit you are doing a particular computation. Right? Whether you bunch them in 3 or whether you bunch them in 1, you are going to make the same labor. Here you end up doing labor only for 2,24,000 bits, whereas there you will work for 3 lakh bits. 3 lakh bits are to be brought in chunks. Here you will have to bring only 2,24,000 bits in chunks. For example, in one attempt, if you can bring 1000 bits, this will have 224 disk access, whereas the other one will have 300 disk access. Right? So that is the saving. number of bits needed to represent, you are just archiving, that I want to minimize, and here that is minimized.